All right. Welcome back to the Adaptive Journey podcast. I'm Albert Wolfe from Adaptive Leaders. I'm a writer and executive coach based in Guangzhou, China. And JD, why don't you introduce yourself?
And I'm JD Whitney. I'm also with Adaptive Leaders, our principal coach for the United States and based out of Los Angeles.
So today we're talking about our performance leadership model. We're kind of, as we record these, we're kind of going backwards, actually, which is
Yep.
funny. EMMA, EMMA, expectations, motivations, measurements, and accountability. These are the four keys to getting more out of your team, to really seeing what kind of extraordinary results they can do. So we did accountability last time. Let's go back in time to the second M, measurements. What are some of your opening thoughts on measurements, JD?
Well, I think the first place that goes, maybe to make the very obvious connection that it's hard to hold people to account around something that you're not measuring. And there's so many factors for measuring, but yeah, last time we talked about one of the questions that accountability answers is anybody gonna do anything about it? Or
Who's
yeah,
caring about
do they
stuff?
care? Do
Yeah.
they care that this is going well or that this is going badly? And measurements kind of answers the question, is anybody paying attention? It's one thing, as our model talks about, it's one thing to clarify expectations, it's one thing to motivate people, but measurements is all about, this is how we know we're winning. There's great work, obviously, by the people behind oh my goodness, totally spaced out right
Are you
there.
thinking about 4DX?
4DX,
Disciplines?
4 disciplines of
Yeah.
execution, around putting up a scoreboard, and just the
Yeah.
research that they did behind the fact that when we know we're winning, it's inspiring. When we know that we're close to winning, it's inspiring. When we know that, we're doing way worse than we ought to be, is motivating. And I think measurements is all about shining a light, or putting up a dashboard to know, hey, are we winning? Are we going in the right direction? And not sometimes I know that, but
Yeah.
does our whole team know that? Do we have something to stand on? So I think that's the base concept, and then that makes the sense of the accountability conversation feel a lot more fair, a lot more reasonable, and of course, there's a lot more we can go into there. But I think that's a good start for this concept of measurement. But there's obviously a lot of challenges in implementing this.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about all the work we've done with clients and, a variety of industries on these topics. Measurements to me is the one that we get the most like kind of violent reactions to. People are always like, they're either like, measurements, I hate all that, or woohoo, measurements, now you're speaking my language. There's like
Mm,
this polarizing effect. But we're actually not saying Excel sheets. We're saying something bigger than that. We're saying measuring and like knowing whether you're winning or not. But people sort of have this instinctive gut reaction to the word measurements.
yeah, and obviously, one of the things I love about our performance leadership model about Emma is that we're talking about simple things. There's nothing new here. If you're a leader at any level, if you're even an employee at any level, there's no way you've not had a question about expectations, or felt that clarifying those would help you do better. Same with being motivated, same with measurement, same with accountability. There's no surprises here, and we're not trying to add anything really to the repertoire of leadership in the sense of anything new. We're identifying four things that work as a system. They're relatively simple. If you do them, performance improves. If you don't do them, performance doesn't improve. And anyway, so one of the things I wanted to connect that in with what you just said, Albert, is so many companies, and especially sometimes the bigger the company is, the more they measure.
Yeah.
And we want to be really clear that not all measurement is the measurement that we're talking about here. We're talking about measuring what really matters.
Yeah.
And I think there's two broad categories for that. And you can maybe, I don't know, you might have another one here, Albert, but the two that immediately jump to my mind that we're doing with people is, are you measuring the right number of things?
Yeah.
So again, this is nothing new. The people in 40X talk about this extensively, and I'm sure if you have worked with a good consultant, they've kept you down to three. But the number of times it's like, oh yeah, I have 27 KPIs in our performance management system. That's
Yeah.
not a KPI. That is a performance indicator, but it's not a key performance indicator. You may have
Yeah.
20, 15 OKRs. Okay, but those aren't all Ks. Those
Yeah.
are those may be O's and R's, but they're not all Ks. They're not key. What we're talking about here is are you dialing in on the one, two, maybe three things for your team, for individuals that are really going to shift performance? And so that's the first thing. And the second thing is the idea of when we talk about measurement, and I think some of you listening will really resonate with this. I don't know anybody who hasn't experienced this at some level in their life. Being measured for things that you can't control.
Yeah.
So, and it's not to say that those measurements don't matter. I grew up playing sports. I grew up playing music. In both of those, at some point, it was either a good concert, you won the game, or you didn't. And that's a reality that you cannot get around. But my part of it as an individual, as an athlete, might have been I played baseball. So a much more simple number for my success of what was my on base percentage? Back then, we didn't have advanced stats. I was a catcher. There's certain things I could control as a catcher. How many balls did I let by me? How many of those were my fault, or did the pitcher just throw it 20 feet above the plate? Because that happened once or twice in my journey. Uh, how did I do? That's one thing. And I could get really, really demotivated if the only way anybody ever interacted with me was based on how the team did. Because I was
Yeah.
on some teams where I played well and the team did terribly. So I think we can all relate at some level. I'm using a sports analogy, music analogy. Did I play the notes? Did I play them in the right tempo? Did I play them along with everybody else in the way I was supposed to? Volume, expression, all of that. And then did somebody else do something that just blew the whole thing? I don't want to. I don't want to just be seen as the end result. I want to be seen for the work that I'm doing to contribute, make possible an end result that is good. And I think that's a really critical thing that keeps people from wanting to be measured
Yeah.
and sometimes keeping people from wanting to measure.
Yeah, I think so. I think some of the emotional reaction is people have been burned by being held accountable, maybe for some measurements that were not in their direct control, and like that just doesn't feel right to people. And so we're not saying that your stock price or your sales closed or whatever those measurements are irrelevant. They're definitely relevant. But what we are saying is people need to feel that sense of connection to the work I'm doing that's getting measured most frequently. And I think the other thing we talk about is getting talked about. Like I'm getting talked
Mm,
to about this stuff. Like we'll just use a simple example. Somebody in a sales position who's working the phones or whatever. If the thing that they're getting talked to is the manager's stopping by their desk and saying, how many sales have you made? Well, anybody who's done any sales knows there's maybe a lot that's out of control there. People didn't answer the phone. They weren't interested. They're not, if you're selling food, they're not hungry right now. And if the manager's only talking to me about that stuff, or that's their first question, or that's their most important thing, that's really discouraging. But if they're
mm,
saying, how many of your target that you set for yourself today, calls that you were going to make, or what we call these drivers that you can take charge of, how many of your drivers did you do? Oh, you know what? I'm going to stay extra today to do even more drivers because that's something I can control. And if my manager is talking to me on that level, that's that's connecting me with my own locus of control, my own motivations. And yes, we cannot, we're in the World Cup right now. We cannot ignore the fact that at the end of the game, there is a winner and a loser. There's two big numbers on the screen. We can't ignore that. But during the game, you can bet that the best coaches in the world are not shouting, score more goals, score. That's not what they're shouting. They're shouting, get closer to your guy, or hustle more. They're shouting things that the players can control. That's
Yeah,
what they're
absolutely.
talking to them about.
Absolutely. So I think you touched on a couple of key things here that we should explore, hinted at them. One is what are some of those resistances that people have to measuring? And I think that's a really, there's plenty down that rabbit hole that we could go down. And I think there's also an issue around measuring. So some things are super easy, right? Like how many widgets came off the assembly line. There are some things that are really easy to measure, and then there are some things that are not that at first glance can feel very difficult when we're dealing a lot of times with people leadership
Yeah.
and things that have been classified more as these soft skills. I like to call it human skills, but we could talk
Yeah.
about that another time. But these kind of less objective things, and so it might be interesting to talk a little bit about how to turn some of those things that don't feel as objectively measurable into measurables, and how we do that. Because again, we do it all the time, and sometimes it's quite simple to do, and I think our listeners would benefit from that. Um, would you like
Yeah.
to jump into either of those, Albert?
Yeah, I was just thinking about a recent client in the tech industry, and they really wanted to work. So these are all, this is the soft skill, people skill side, because that sales example might not have resonated with very many people. So they want to just think about collaboration. They want to improve collaboration. Super hard to measure. How good is our collaboration? 7. Nobody can
Yeah.
tell. You can't tell how good your collaboration is. So the really simple framework that we're talking about is what if what if you ask one more question than you normally ask? If you normally ask 0, how about ask 1? If you ask 1, how about ask 2? And just like in a normal interaction, first of all, be a little bit introspective. Are you asking a lot of questions, or are you kind of like being the expert and like talking to people? Okay, so depending on who you are, um, here's some other ways to ask questions, and that's measurable. You're in control of that. You can add whatever your Q plus one, whatever your normal question number is, plus one. These are engineers, they're happy to hear that kind of language. But then addressing your resistance things like, well, why might you not actually do that? Yeah. It sounds like a good idea. And this is where we always talk about those adaptive challenges. You know what to do. You just cannot bring yourself to do it. So, like, well, I think it's going to waste time. I think that the result's going to be worse. I think that I'll look incompetent if I'm asking questions. Like, people have a huge range of resistance to doing the thing that we've just told them to measure. And they've actually agreed, yeah, that would improve collaboration. But it's just that, and there's this big rock that you kind of have to lift up and say, oh, there's lots of reasons why I probably won't do what I just said I should.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I think about what you just said, so maybe to give people a very, very tangible, you're leading a team and you want to implement measurement a little bit better, maybe on the soft skill side. So you look at your team and you look and you have let's say you have first off, let's be honest. When you look at your team, you know where they're doing well and you know where they're not doing well. That's incredibly likely. Now about your own self, you might need a little help, but for your team, I would guess most of you have a pretty good idea where you'd like to see behavior change in your team. Uh, I'll give you some, like, these are a couple of hacks from how we would do this, like how we would get to that, hey, ask more questions moment that Albert just mentioned as a measurement. What we might do is, in our case, when we come to and then do a one-on-one executive coaching engagement, we typically will do an interview with a kind of 360, quick 360 interview the executive's boss or the people they report to, if there's a matrix, more than one, interview a couple of peers, interview a couple of people that report to them, some that maybe are fond of them and some that maybe are less like a fan. And we'll talk to those people. And what we're looking for in that, and the reason why we do them as interviews is because we're looking for specific behaviors. So this is very different than I want this person to be more assertive, or I want this person to be less assertive and more inquiring. We're looking for specific behavior. So that what comes out then at the end of the day is I need them to be more collaborative. What does that actually mean? When I talk to the people they're interacting with, they're like, we can never get that person to do anything because they don't listen. So when we're talking about something, it's all well and good, and then we get to this point, and they just have a lot of things to say, and we
Yeah.
don't actually find the. So that would lead you to that moment of like, so in this kind of situation, you'd like them to ask one or two more questions. Oh my goodness, that would be a breath of fresh air. And
Yeah.
like, they're smart, they're capable, like our teams work well together. We think we could go so far. This is the change. So that's just giving you a little bit of an idea of like, you see the change that you need. Look for what's the behavior. How does that change that you'd like show up in behavior? And then think about what's the smallest action step and the specific situation. That's the thing that you want to measure. So, in this week, when you were in a collaborative conversation, when you talk to the person in the silo next to you, how many questions did you ask? That's something you can check in around the water cooler. You can drop by a desk. You can send a Teams message and say, hey, JD, when you talked to Albert this week, how many questions did you ask? Hey, in your podcast this week, how many times did you ask Albert a question? Uh, and that's some of you might get me back in the comments here for that. Um, the anyway, that's how we would convert that into that measurable thing. And then when that's agreed between you and the person who's reporting to you, that again just is a part of really clarifying expectations. But then there's a number target, which is really what makes it a measurement. I would love to see you do that once or twice. And again, that's getting to the driver, the thing that is really the thing that's going to make the change. If it's sales, what's the thing that you need this person to do more of? And okay, so if we move into the barriers, here's two barriers because one of them just popped right off the map at me when I said that. Uh, One reason why sometimes we don't give people measurables is because we don't know.
Yeah.
So I've got a sales team. I've got everybody doing less well than I want them to do.
Yeah. But we
And
don't know why.
I don't, yeah, I don't know why. So I come to them and I say, hey, we need more sales, work harder, drive harder, push harder, do more of something. And that's not measurement for one. And two, like we can't measure because we don't know. The data is not, for whatever reason, the data is not there to tell us. Now, that's where we turn on our curiosity. Does our team actually know? You're asking us to do these three kinds of sales approaches, but two of them just flat out don't work.
Yeah.
Um,
They might know already.
they might know.
It maybe only you that doesn't know.
If they don't know and you don't know, you might need some curiosity with your target customer, to go and identify some things that you don't know today. So, I think that would be one of the big barriers to measurement is that you don't actually know what to measure.
Yeah.
Or so you either don't measure anything or you do the very performance management system answer and measure literally everything. And it's not to say you
Yeah.
shouldn't measure if in manufacturing, we work with manufacturing clients. There's
Yeah.
so many things that are a natural measurement part of that process. But then when you look at, okay, what are the behaviors we need to change to drive improvements in across the board in those numbers or in the particular numbers that we're trying to change? That's where we need to lean in a little bit further and pick one, two, or three changes that we want to make right now.
Yeah. Let's just fill out this curiosity. So we always talk about the three C's,
Yeah.
the lever or the little knobs. We've experimented with like a soundboard with three little sliders. The three
Yeah.
C's are the way to stay adaptive, to be more adaptive. We call it the 3C adaptive core sometimes. You have to be curious, courageous, and caring more than is natural for you, um, because you're already naturally very good at those three things. But if you want a different result than you're getting now, something's got to change. And we always encourage people. And as you're listening to this conversation about measurements, and you're maybe noting some of your reactions,
Hmm.
maybe gut reactions, or maybe somebody comes to mind. You probably need to pick one of those three C's, curiosity, courage, or care, to lean into more than normal. and that will unlock something in the realm of measurements. And just one final reminder that this is the middle part of a system. Emma is a system where we're not saying the secret to unlocking great performance in your team is measurements. We're saying that measurements is one of the four pieces of the Emma performance leadership. Like JD's saying, it's intuitive. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. I think we're trying to relabel the wheel maybe to make it easier
Mm,
to
make it easier
to
to remember and make sure you implement it.
yeah, like when we introduce models to people, we're thinking of like three C's, that's like three words, and then Emma is four letters. So we want to keep it very easy to at the front of your mind. If something's not working, you have a place to look, basically.
Albert, this is a perfect example. This is a perfect example of Emma.
Yeah,
If I'm looking at a leader and saying, how do I help this leader lead their team well? What do they need to do to lead their team well? If I go to LinkedIn and start scrolling down LinkedIn and looking for leadership material, I will go past article after article, 4 ways to do this, 3 things to do this, 7 ways to revolutionize your leadership. And I will find 10,000 things that I could do as a leader. And honestly, most of those things are good things and they're backed in research and there's good stories and anecdotes behind them. What do you do first?
yeah,
What do you do? Like, what do you make of all of that? And for us as a company, one of our huge things is to say we can be as smart as those people over at Harvard, and we know some of those people over at Harvard, and we like the work they do. You could be as smart as all that, but if you don't do anything with it on Monday morning, then it's kind of a waste.
yeah,
That executive MBA, that executive roundtable that you participated in, if you don't do something about it on Monday, that's a waste. Uh, so what we focus on is simple frameworks, common things that we see over and over and over again that are levers you can pull to get improvement quickly because you actually did them. And so Emma itself is 4 measurements effectively. It's not 17
yeah,
measurements.
yeah.
I heard a talk one time about 30 leadership buckets, and I just about cried. I was like, I don't want to hear another word. I couldn't remember 30 leadership buckets if I wanted to. It's a simple way to say, am I doing the things that I need to do
Yeah,
to lead my team well and get great performance? So 4 things. And I think that makes it less intimidating to jump into. And for you then, as a listener, if you're thinking about your team, how do you simplify the world that they're looking at to say, here's the 1 or 2 or 3.
yeah,
In our case, we stretched to 4 with Emma. But what are the things that you need to do to move the needle here? And let's make it as simple as possible and focus on actually doing it. And that's where measurements feeds into accountability so nicely. We can see if it's happening, and I know there's a conversation coming if I don't do it.
yeah.
And I know if I do it, there's a conversation coming. And that's motivating.
And I think our background as leading teams ourselves in, a variety of contexts, we really, really sympathize with there's just too much. If you've even carved
Yeah.
out 30 minutes to listen to this podcast today, it's probably on a commute, you're waiting for a plane. There's just too much. And so it's, you have to, the one little thing that you actually do is better than 30 buckets of information download. So I guess my final thought for this is Emma and the 3 C's are meant to be tools to guide your intuition. Leaders, there's research about this. Leaders generally follow their intuition about what to focus on and what to do. And you are in your position. You are successful because your intuition is darn good. But it's also missing. It's got blind spots. And so Emma is just a quick little checklist: expectations, motivations, measurements, accountability. Which of those, now turn back on your intuition, which of those do you think needs more attention for your team right now?
And it's a great opportunity just to mention one of the things that we've built is a performance leadership assessment. And it's super simple, super easy. We've included it as part of our studio, which starts at $299 US a year for per leader. this is one of the things that, first, the assessment that we created, because we just want you to have a way to start the conversation. There's all kinds of other stuff involved in that is helpful and useful, but one of the greatest ways to know which part of Emma is to ask, and we just wanted to create a way that the people we work with could ask at scale, and or ask simply without even having to have the conversation if that's not something that's already part of your practice. And so that's included in a lot of the products and services that we provide. And then the studio, for those of you who don't know, is something that we did because we think the best stuff shouldn't just go to the people who have the high job titles. We want to make sure that you're able in your organization to cascade down models like Emma down into the leadership of your organization, so that even your frontline or mid managers are implementing things like Emma and really driving performance in alignment with your strategy. So anyway, that's something that we're very excited about, and an opportunity if you're like, how am I doing at these 4 things?
Yeah.
Something that is really accessible.
We'll put a link to the studio in the show notes here. And it is very exciting because it scales very easily to the whole organization or whole leadership team. And then everybody's got the same shared language, and everybody's really on the same page when they're sitting down having performance leadership discussions. So
absolutely. Yeah.
So that's the that's studio.adaptiveleaders.com if you can't wait to click the thing in the show description. And and so this concludes our conversation about the measurement gap. I guess so we're doing accountability gap and the measurement gap here. I'm going to use one of my drivers and ask you a question. How's your thinking shifted from our conversation today?
I think I'm thinking a lot about there's a lot of really common barriers to measurements. And I think that's a thing that it is worth I think maybe we ought to write an article on it, and get it back up and maybe come back around, and really address some of those a bit more specifically. I think today we talked some about the mechanics and some about the ways that it might play out, and a little bit into that adaptive space. But I think there's really just 4 or 5 really, really clear things that come up over and over again in this. And I think that's something that we ought to do a better job of sharing out with people, so you don't feel alone when you're struggling to figure out how to do measurement in your organization. How about you, Albert?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about there's these 2 tensions that really came up today. One is the big number, and then like the little numbers. And that can be the win-lose number plus all of the other stats, or it could be the difference between like the number you can't control and all the things that you can. But then there's this other tension, which is the unmeasurable stuff that is going on all the time, and we just can't pretend that everything's measurable. It's just not. It's the value that you bring to your organization, for example, as a listener in whatever industry you're in. There's really no way to measure that value, and it's probably much higher than anyone, especially you, is thinking about. And so I've been really struck by the unmeasurables today, which is a little bit counter topic since we're supposed to be talking about measurement. But that's just really really powerful, and we don't want to forget that's out there.
Absolutely.
So
the intangibles, the X factor.
That it is, and it's it's got to be there. For everything else, there's Emma.
You're making me think, Albert, as we close up, of a great question to everybody listening. Are your intangibles, is your X factor in the positive or in the negative in your environment? And what might you do to increase and add value to that? Thanks everybody for joining our conversation today. It's been great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.